Hello everyone. Let us master the CBSE Class 10 Science Chapter 5 Life Processes Respiration section today. Starting with cellular respiration. Let us see how we breathe at every cell level. We know glucose, which is a 6-carbon molecule, absorbed by the blood vessels after digestion in the villi, are brought to each and every cell in the body. Once this glucose reaches to the cell, the 6-carbon molecule glucose is broken down into a 3-carbon molecule called pyruvate and energy. This happens in the cytoplasm. The further breakdown of pyruvate depends completely on the availability of oxygen to the cell. Anaerobic respiration. So there are two parts here. That is, there is absence or lack of oxygen in the cell. Absence of oxygen means there is zero oxygen. Lack of oxygen means there is little oxygen than what is needed. So let's look at what happens when there is absence of oxygen. So pyruvate, when there is absence of oxygen, which usually occurs in yeast, converts itself to ethanol and carbon dioxide with some release of energy. So if there is a lack of oxygen, which usually occurs in our muscle cells, the pyruvate converts itself into lactic acid and some energy. Aerobic respiration. Now let us say there is abundance of oxygen available to the cell. Then what happens is the pyruvate, in the presence of oxygen, usually occurring in the mitochondria, converts itself to carbon dioxide, water and energy. And you can see here that the energy during this process is much higher than the energy in the prior two options. The energy released during these processes is broken down into ATP, which generates specific amount of energy to fuel all the activities of the cell. So respiration in plants, we know that plants use stomata for exchange of gases. During the day, the oxygen from photosynthesis is used for respiration. At night, when photosynthesis doesn't occur, carbon dioxide release is a major activity in plants. So coming to aquatic animals like fish breathe the oxygen that is dissolved in water. They take water through their mouth, force it to pass through the gills where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by the blood. Since the amount of dissolved oxygen is very low in water, the rate of breathing is higher in aquatic animals. Let us now look at respiration in human beings. So let us look at the parts of the human respiratory system. It starts with the nose and then pharynx and larynx, which help in swallowing and voice. Then we have trachea, which branches out to bronchi and further into bronchioles inside the lung, which end at alveolar sacs. Let us now understand the entire process of respiration. Let us see what happens at each step. Nose. When we inhale, we lift our ribs and flatten our diaphragm, which expands our chest cavity and air gets sucked into the nose. Now, nose serves as a primary entry point for air. The nasal cavity has fine hair which removes dust particle, warms and humidifies the air before it reaches the lungs. Air then enters into the trachea where it is covered with rings of cartilage to prevent it from collapsing. The air from trachea reaches both the lungs and branches into bronchi and further into bronchioles in each of the lung. At the end of the bronchioles are sac-like structures called alveoli. These structures receive the entire air in them where the exchange of gases takes place. The exchange of gases takes place with the help of diffusion. Let us see how that happens. The alveoli are supplied with blood vessels. The carbon dioxide from the blood moves into the alveoli and the oxygen from the alveoli moves into the bloodstream for further transportation into the body. Carbon dioxide in the body is exhaled out through the nose, and there is always some residual amount of air in the lungs so that there is sufficient time for oxygen exchange and release of carbon dioxide in the alveoli. Now, simple diffusion alone cannot completely carry the entire oxygen to every cell of the body. So there are respiratory pigments like hemoglobin, which have high affinity for oxygen, which help in transportation of oxygen to every part of the body. Now that we have understood how respiration takes place, let us try and answer a quiz to see how much we have learned. First question. What is the function of rings of cartilage on trachea? Right, it protects the trachea from collapsing. Second, which pigment helps in oxygen absorption into the blood vessels? Right, hemoglobin. Third question, how do alveoli help in oxygen transfer? Right, alveoli are thinly walled and richly supplied with blood vessels for diffusion to occur.